I just wanted to orient you guys to your screen and some options. So in the upper left-hand corner is the volume control, and there's a little person with his hand raised, and you can pick different options such as raising your hand or agreeing, and Teresa will keep an eye on that. You can also have a smiley face, and Teresa will keep an eye on that and interrupt me if there's questions, or you can always type in the chat box as well. But I might be using that a little bit. And then in the right-hand corner is a full screen option. If you click on that, it makes the PowerPoint a little bit bigger for you. And then in the bottom left-hand corner is the chat box and a file pod where you can download a PDF version and a PowerPoint version of today's presentation. I know some people like to use the slides for other things, so I uploaded that as well as a PDF if you just wanted to take notes. And then there's a few other documents in there that we'll be going over today. All right. So again, today's the second in the three-part classroom series, focusing on classrooms. And so the context of all of these presentations is database problem solving at the classroom level. And in the last the online chat that Kathy did focusing on environment, she introduced the Classroom Coaching Guide, and that's a new resource that we have available. I'm not going to spend time on that during this session because it was already reviewed, but again, this is the context of this presentation going over some of the curricular variables that might present as barriers to success in learning in the classroom. So we're going to go over what your behavioral curricula is, some lesson plans and schedules for teaching, and then how to make some adaptations to address student needs. So this is just a wonderful problem-solving process. Again, we're going to go over some of the the barriers that you might see during problem analysis that are associated with curriculum that might prevent students from engaging in Tier 1 expectations, and then how those link with strategies, prevention strategies, teaching strategies, consequences, and then reinforcing strategies throughout the presentation. So that's kind of the context for this. So some foundational ideas that we're going to revisit throughout the presentation is just the idea that everything that the teacher is doing, their behavior, is so important for student behavior. And so students enter your classroom with their own learning histories, their own behavioral tendencies, their academic performance levels, those kinds of things. And so what we're going to focus on are those teacher behaviors that are going to increase the chances that your students are going to experience some success in learning in the classroom. So those things that have the highest likelihood of making an impact on your students. I think that's what I want to say about that. And so this is also just to kind of orient everyone to what the focus of this is going to be. So your behavioral curriculum includes the explicit teaching of your classroom rules and procedures and what the Tier 1 expectations look like in your classrooms, as well as those explicit kind of social skills or 21st century skills that students need to have mastered in order to interact with and engage in the instruction effectively. And also we're going to be going over how you might integrate this more directly into your academic lesson planning process. So what are some of the, so what is your behavioral curriculum, I guess, or what are some of the important curricular variables that you want to consider? Making sure that your classroom rules are defined for each of your school-wide expectations, making sure that classroom procedures and routines are explicitly identified for activities, and that routines in the classroom are taught. And what we mean by expected routines in the classroom are taught are things like specific social, emotional, and behavioral skills that students need to interact with the instruction and curriculum, specifically for academic lessons. So things like how to collaborate with peers and how to receive feedback from others, those kinds of things. Making sure that you're teaching those in an effective way, including demonstration of those behaviors, modeling, having students engaging in some role play, and that you're providing students opportunities to practice those newly acquired skills, increasing the opportunities for them to respond and engage in instruction, and then making sure that you're providing them feedback on how they're doing with that. You want to make sure that you're specific with that feedback and that you're acknowledging appropriate behaviors more than you're acknowledging inappropriate behaviors. And the research says anywhere from 3 to 6 positive to every negative is probably most effective. So we focus on the behavioral curricula for a variety of reasons, but most of the important ones are listed here. So increases in academic engaged time, academic success, increasing socially appropriate behaviors among students, and this ensuring that those behaviors sustain even after the teachers aren't present, establishing positive classroom climate, and experiencing reductions in disruptions, referrals, and referrals for ESE services. All right, so the curriculum. What is your behavioral curriculum? Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion over what the differences or similarities are between Tier 1 expectations and rules, specifically for the classroom. So your classroom rules are those specific, observable, and measurable behaviors that you want students to demonstrate. And they clarify what the Tier 1 expectations look like in the classroom. So here's a little bit more of a concrete definition for you that you might want to consider sharing with your teachers. In developing your classroom rules, you want to make sure that they're developed from the get-go. So at the start of any school year, anytime a student's entering a classroom, they know what the expectations for appropriate behavior are in that environment, and making sure that they sort of fit these characteristics. So you're clarifying what appropriate behavior looks like, what you want students to do, and providing and considering some memorization aids. So making sure that you have few in number. 5 is typically the maximum that's recommended. You're providing a lot of repetition and visual aids to make sure that students keep these, have these, I guess, in mind at all times, and that you're communicating. Another strategy is to communicate these to families so that families know what appropriate behavior is in the classroom and can reinforce that at home. Including students in the development and implementation of rules. So sometimes starting off the school year with 3 basic teacher rules that they really feel are important for successful classroom learning, and then having students give input on the last 2, and this is an effective prompt for that. So having students think of behaviors that they feel are needed to work together in class to inform, maybe those last two classroom rules. Again, making sure they're aligned with your Tier 1 expectations, and making sure that if you have unique classroom needs, if it's a PE, quote-unquote classroom, or a science lab, things like that, making sure that the rules address anything unique to that environment. And then throughout the year, you want to make sure that you are adjusting and being responsive to issues that arise in your classroom. So taking a look at maybe some problems that you're seeing in your classroom, identifying systems that are working or what skills students are lacking, and maybe making some revisions to your rules based on some of these things. Here's just some examples of what Tier 1 classroom rules that are aligned with Tier 1 expectations might look like, and how they can be different depending on the teacher and how they operationalize what those look like. Here's some additional examples from a school, and this was a PE, this is a gym classroom rule. So in this school, they had the same 4 classroom rules throughout the school, and they left the 5th one open for teachers to add any specific rule that they really felt was important for their classroom. And this was a kindergarten classroom, but that was cute. Here's an example of a classroom management plan. We just kind of illustrate how you can align your classroom rules with the Tier 1 expectations. And then outlining some of the common procedures that are in class, and task analyzing those procedures and making sure that there's visual reminders for students. There's a blank copy of this in the file pod for you to download as well. Most of these resources that I'm going over are in the classroom coaching guide that hopefully will be posted and available on the website shortly. We don't have an exact date yet. January, probably. Here are some other examples of common procedures and just some ways to post them and provide that visual reminder for students, because we're always looking for examples of what these look like in schools. So if you want, I'd like you to share some ideas for procedures or classroom rules or tips for developing these things that you have found to be especially helpful in your schools and in your classrooms and with your teachers. And also any ideas you have for disseminating this information to the teachers at your schools. So I know some of you are here as PBIS coaches, PBIS team members. How are you planning on taking this information back to the teachers in your schools to make sure that they're receiving this as well? Printer expectations and rules for specific settings on students' planners. That's really good. See, a couple more people are typing. I guess this is a good time to give a shout out to my Hernando County PBIS coaches. They're having their coaches meeting today for the online chat. I'm really glad you guys are here. So I will use, and Paige, I've seen them on schools' websites. I'll use this information to share with one of our PBIS schools, learning community to improve engagement. Perfect. All right. I'm just going to keep going. Our expectations for the building are posted in every room and throughout the building. Each area of the building has unique expectations posted in those areas. Okay. So then for each setting, they've kind of operationally defined what the expectations look like. That's great. Classroom rules posted in classrooms. School rules are posted around the school. Okay. So moving beyond, so again, this is sort of the what. We're right now kind of going over what you're going to be teaching. Another part of that, in addition to your classroom rules, is some of the more specific social skill kind of aspects to the curriculum that students need to effectively participate in the instruction. Yeah, Paige, I think you should have a PDF version in the files pod. We do the same as Margaret School. So one of the tools that we've developed in order to kind of give some ideas for what social skills might be needed in order to participate in the instruction is this social skills grid. And again, this resource will be available in the classroom coaching guide. So as we move towards the implementation of Common Core State Standards or Florida Standards, a lot of what that is requiring is more peer collaboration, more interaction among students, sort of more advanced interaction among students, and engaging in some debates or perspective-taking activities that do require some pretty advanced social skills. And so in order to set students up for success in peer collaboration or any type of collaborative activities, we want to make sure that we provided some explicit instruction on the social skills that would be needed to engage in those activities appropriately. So peer collaboration, as you can see, requires a lot of social skills among students. And so this is just having teachers think through that process of, if I'm planning an activity where peers are expected to collaborate, what types of social skills do I need to go over beforehand? And so what I wanted to try to do was link the identification of these various social skills with what teachers are already doing. So as some teachers are engaging in this unpacking process of the Common Core State Standards, and identifying more explicitly what students need to know and understand and be able to do in order to develop essential questions and full lesson plans, we want to think through not only what students need to be able to do specifically for the standard, but what are the implied skills? What are those social skills, those 21st century skills that are needed to effectively work with peers and participate in the instruction? And so this is just an unpacking activity that some of those from the PSRTI project use with districts and with teachers when they're unpacking the standards. And so this kind of just illustrates where those implied skills are identified. And here's an example of the speaking and listening standard for language arts for 3rd grade. And so one of the standards is to engage effectively in a range of collaborative discussions, one-on-one, in groups, and teacher-led with diverse partners on grade 3 topics and texts, building on others' ideas and expressing their own clearly. So what are the implied skills or social skills that are foundational and necessary in order to achieve this standard? And those are some examples are listed here. So collaboration and teaming, being able to clearly communicate, active listening, action planning, goal setting, and most, if not all, of these already have developed lesson plans around these social skills in existing evidence-based curricula, such as skill streaming. And it's also just as easy to develop a lesson plan around these social skills to develop, but to integrate within your academic lesson. So, I'm going to give you an example of that in 1 second. Here's another example of the 6th grade. I think that's language arts, yep. And this is the standard is to determine a central idea of text and how it's conveyed through particular details, provide summary of the text distinct from personal opinions or judgment. So in identifying what students should be able to do, some of the implied skills, social skills, 21st century skills, whatever label you want to put on those interpersonal skills that are needed, a lot of them are interpersonal skills that are needed to work with peers and to engage in the instruction. Things like communicating clearly, reasoning effectively, making judgments and decisions. So once you've sort of unpacked your standard and you're moving towards then developing your essential question and then designing lesson plans that are specific to outlining activities for each day, what you want to do is consider building into your lesson plans specifically when and with what lesson plans you're going to be teaching those social skills that you identified in step 4 previously. So in this example, some of the implied skills that were identified include, perspective taking, collaboration, goal setting. So when you're designing your lesson, where are you building in the explicit instruction for all of those social skills? During what session and what lesson plans are you using to do that? So here is I know you can't read this very well, but here are some examples of how that's built into the lesson plan that teachers develop. And this is actually a lesson plan that was taken from CPALM for a biology standard, I believe. And so you can see here, communicating with others was one of the social skills. So identifying and asking a question. So identifying the lesson plan from skill streaming, because asking a question is a social skill that is a lesson plan that's provided in skill streaming, elementary and adolescent. So more or less just trying to figure out ways that you can build into what you're already doing time for teaching the behaviors that are needed for students to engage in these new standards. Let's see. So now that we've talked about what you're going to teach, we're going to talk about how you're going to teach it. So designing the lesson plans for teaching those behaviors. And making sure that your lesson plans include these important components, whether you're teaching your rules, procedures, or discrete skills. Making sure that you're including the explicit instruction and the modeling, the guided practice, providing students to demonstrate and practice those behaviors, and making sure that you're giving them feedback on that, and then providing them with some independent practice. And you'll notice that with any evidence-based social skills curriculum even, all of these components are built into those curricula. So these characteristics are those same characteristics that, regardless of what behavioral skill you're teaching, are necessary for effective student learning. And so with an explicit instruction, you want to make sure that you're showing and telling students what it is that is expected of them under the specific circumstances, making sure that you're not assuming that they know or understand prior. So making sure you're being very clear. Making sure you're using verbal prompts and physical demonstration, and then using natural models. So making sure that you're showing them what it looks like, having students engage in some role plays to provide another model of what appropriate behavior looks like. And then as you move into the independent practice, making sure that you are providing those verbal prompts and reminders, and you're providing prompts in a way that are sort of the smallest prompt necessary to facilitate appropriate behavior. Making sure you're using pre-correction, so those questions that act as reminders, and making sure students respond, and then you're praising or correcting them based on that response. And you want to make sure that when you are going through the we do and you do, you're thinking of ways to increase opportunities for students to respond and to demonstrate that appropriate behavior. The more opportunities that you give students to demonstrate and practice appropriate behavior, the more opportunities you have to provide positive reinforcement, which we know is sort of the big stick, the most effective strategy for changing behavior. Here are just some considerations for modeling. So when you're providing a model to students on appropriate behavior, some of these considerations, and this is actually just taken from skill streaming, just making sure that you're depicting positive outcomes, you are depicting all of the steps in the correct sequence, one skill at a time, those kinds of things. Making sure you're making it relevant, meaningful to students. So it's just kind of a checklist. Here are some of the lesson plan examples from the Tier 1 training. And so these are, again, the basic components that are needed to teach behavior. This is actually for the cafeteria, but this can be adapted for the classroom setting very easily. And note that this one actually has 6 rules. But that was just sort of just to give you an idea of what they might look like. In no way do you need 6 rules for a setting. And making sure that you're including examples and non-examples. So if you are looking to integrate this within your academic lesson planning process, making sure that your examples and non-examples are specifically linked with classroom behavior. Let's say you're starting a new unit on some sort of exploration around the classroom. Making sure you're going over what appropriate behaviors for that activity look like in your example, and then what inappropriate behaviors or non-examples might look like specific to that activity. And then again, thinking about how you might include this information, these activities and plans for rewarding, again, examples and non-examples, into your academic lesson plans that teachers are already developing. And I tried to get an idea of the lesson planning templates that teachers are using, but it seemed to be pretty different from district to district. Poster, PowerPoint. That's a really good point, Alessandra. Thanks for sharing. Yes, it does. Here's a resource from the Classroom Coaching Guide, and it's also available on our website right now. If you put in the search bar Palmetto Teach Tos. And so these are pre-existing lesson plans that go over sort of the goal, skill that you want students to demonstrate, and then outlines the procedures for you, including the modeling, the we do, the you do, and making sure that your lesson plans follow or include sort of these characteristics. And then the helpful thing with these is that it already gives you ideas for what to include in the positive, the inappropriate behavior, and then the almost but not quite. So that's that shaping process to give students an idea of this is close, but it's not exactly what we're looking for just yet, or just quite. And this is for communicating with others. There's tons in this resource. Again, so teachers aren't having to recreate the wheel or develop something that's already out there. So how can they integrate this information with, again, the lesson planning process that they're already doing in the classroom? I just wanted to include these to give you some ideas for visual reminders for classroom procedures and making sure that you're using the positives for your visual reminders, but also in sequential order of what you want those procedures to look like. And making sure that you have procedures set up and posted in your classroom for those academic routines. I thought it was interesting that in this one reading area of a classroom they outlined what real reading looked like and then fake reading, and in very behavioral terms. I thought that was cute. That was an issue that came up in this classroom, and that's how they addressed it. And then this is also very nice. This was in a lower performing. Students in this classroom on average tended to be lower performing, and they didn't always have the appropriate language necessary to ask for help. So the teacher posted this in the front of the room and made it very clear to them if they're stuck or frustrated, these are the kinds of things that are appropriate to say, just to provide that visual reminder. And I like that it included things like I'm guessing, or I'm thinking, or can I have more time to think, so that students know it's okay to say those kinds of things if they do need some extra time, instead of getting frustrated or feeling overwhelmed. So those are just some ideas. All right, now we're going to go talking a little bit. We've kind of reviewed what to teach and how to teach it, and we're going to go over a little bit more of the schedule. So the schedule for teaching, here are some considerations when you're thinking about your schedule. Some schools have sort of a school-wide monthly theme or focus that they have for behavior based on character educational or other things, and other times they implement more of a school-wide focus based on data that's indicative of an increasing trend or a common month or time of the year that's problematic. So they might emphasize respectful behavior during November if they're always seeing that that's a problem. So you want to make sure your classroom lesson plans obviously are aligning with and supportive of that larger school-wide effort. And you want to also consider your classroom data. So those minor behaviors that teachers are addressing in their classrooms, what reoccurring themes are they seeing, and are they making sure that they're including behavioral instruction around those behaviors? And also considering your academic lesson plans and your scope and sequence of your academic units, making sure that if a unit that's coming up is requiring students to engage in very passionate debates about things that they feel are important, then that might require a little extra explicit instruction on appropriate behavior, interacting with peers, those kinds of things. So here's an example from one of our schools that they focused on character education and skill streaming and developed a school-wide monthly focus. So they outlined the month, the character word that aligned with their character, education, identified skill streaming lesson titles, and the lesson that corresponded with those skills, and the dates that those were supposed to be taught. And again, this is specific to skill streaming, but could be adapted for any behavioral curriculum. Here's another example. Again, this is in the Classroom Coaching Guide of how you might integrate your behavioral lessons into the content of your academic lessons. So we only have this completed for kindergarten and first, but it could definitely be created for other grades just as easily. So the Common Core State Standards have suggested readings in the back that they've recommended, suggested that help students that can be used as an instructional tool to help students achieve the standards. And so some of those K drama and poetry stories are listed here. And here are some of the common school-wide expectations or classroom rules that could be used, could be emphasized and taught alongside the story. And here's a short video that shows someone reading the story if you just want to learn more about that story ahead of time. So thinking of ways to develop things like this for your teachers is a good idea of how you can help them make that link between academics and behavior a little easier, and how they can integrate these behavioral lessons into what they're already doing. This is an example of the Houghton Mifflin, I always say that word wrong, reading Legacy of Literacy. I know a lot of districts are moving towards, is it Reading Street as their new reading curriculum? So if somebody wants to develop something similar to this for that curriculum, that would be great. But what they did was identified the theme and title and the character traits that could be emphasized within that unit, along with the social emotional skills and service learning. Yes, it would, Stephanie. And here are some additional books that illustrate the various either concepts or behaviors. This resource is, again, available on the Classroom Coaching Guide that hopefully will be available soon. So just thinking of ways that you can, use a book to not only teach an English language arts standard or skill, but also the appropriate behaviors that you're wanting to see in your classroom. And finally, just considering some of the curricular adaptations that you might want to make within your classroom, that making sure that, the task and activity is appropriate given the student's needs and preferences, chronological age, the information presented in clear, organized fashion. If it's too difficult or easy, those kinds of things. So considering making adaptations in the difficulty level, making sure that you're alternating master skills with novel skills, the success rate is high but not too high, that they're bored, shortening difficult assignments, those kinds of things. And making sure that you're providing choice and variety, and considering students' preference and interest in content or the way that they're responding, or some of the instructional strategies that you're using. And the meaningfulness and relevance. So this is, I think, part of the emphasis in Common Core is trying to get a push towards those skills that are needed for effective career and college-ready kiddos. So those problem-solving, critical thinking and analysis, those collaboration skills, those skills that we use every day in our work, and how we can make students see that these are important and why they're important and meaningful. And so not just doing assignments or activities just to do them, but making sure that they're part of that longer range goal, and that students are seeing why they're important and why they're doing these things. And then functional and meaningful projects. So things like, I know you can't see that, it's kind of off the string, but web design or developing various vocational skills, things that students can use not only for a specific class activity, but just life and preparation for after school. All the things they can't Google. All right, so we're done a little early, but I wanted to give us a chance for people to ask questions. One of the other things that I didn't mention, but is in your pod, is the school-wide pacing guide, and that's just an example too of a school-wide curriculum for teaching behavior that teachers might want to consider when they're planning their lesson, and thinking about ways that if you are organizing your school like that, how the PBIS team can provide lesson plans and support to teachers in order to facilitate teaching of behavior. So does anybody have any questions, comments, ideas that they want to share? I think I've missed a lot of the ideas in the chat box. No. One media center specialist said she arranged the books in the media center at times. Oh, that's a really good idea. Well, it doesn't seem like anyone's got any other questions. So we're going to do one last pod. Oh, I actually have some more slides to go. I forgot about that. We have the next online chat is in January, and this will be the last of the classroom series focusing on instruction. So we'll be going over some various instructional strategies used to teach behavior and how your instruction impacts student behavior. Then the model school application is shortly following that, and we'll be going over tips and tools for completing this upcoming application. This is something that I came across today and I wanted to share with you. This is on the DOE's homepage, and there is a video contest for Parent Involvement Month, which is November, and submissions can be no longer than 45 seconds, and it's for parents, so they convey how they stay involved and engaged in their child's education. And they can submit their video by posting it on the Facebook page or sending it to this link, and they're due by November 27th. So I just thought that would be something great for you guys to know about, and you can share with your schools. Just to not only encourage family engagement, but let them know that November is Parent Involvement and Education Month here in Florida. And this is our contact information. And then finally, we just wanted to give you some information on the PBIS graduate certificate. The University of South Florida and FCIC offer a fully online graduate certificate in PBIS. It's a 12 credit hour course that prepares individuals from mental health, school psych, school administration, education, early education, and social work to be effective members of the school, early childhood, or individual support team implementing PBIS. The program includes classes focused on providing consultation and guiding collaboration, implementing school-wide PBIS, addressing behavior challenges, and intensive individualized information. And then you can get more information at this link. All right, that's all we have. I'm going to pause my mic, and if you guys have any additional questions or anything, go ahead and type them in the chat box. If not, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you found it was helpful. Oh, I have one more poll, actually. Mm-hmm.